Everyone, and welcome back to Fleet's Panda Ramblings. I am a little bit tired today. It's been a long day, but nothing compared to what I was yesterday. Yesterday I was absolutely conked out, just completely gone. There was just nothing. Nothing left. I was just gone ski. But yeah. But anyway. Hope everyone's having a good day. Anyway, so without further ado, let's get on with it. As we do. So we have the final finale of Timu's questions he asked last week, which is question number 2 of 3. Will we do anything else? So, Timu Locker on Patreon asks, hello, Fleet and the rest of the panel. An alt history one for you. Denmark straight, but the luck is reversed. Hood survives and Bismarck takes the fatal magazine hit instead. Same 8 said it's the fireball, just changes address. Does Rydabung ending in an catastrophic kill the service raider concept even faster? And push everything to the U-boats instead? Dönitz would be delighted in his own joyless way. It's hard to say. If anything, a quick ending might be, well, might have been seen as almost, almost expected. Bismarck went out alone, without her sister, and with only a heavy cruiser for escort. The reason that Operation Berlin worked so well is that the two Scharnhorsts are basically a proposition you can't take on. Return, so you can't take on without a significant force. Like, you're talking at least 2 battleships, ideally 3, to take them on if they're together. Whereas with Bismarck, 2 battleships, even if you have Prinz Eugen, 2 battleships is overkill, in theory. So possible way to do it, but otherwise it's almost like it is almost like the well, it's almost like the expected outcome actually occurred. Although there is also the option that, since she did die so quickly, there may be questions asked of the designers of Bismarck and Tirpitz may be examined, well, very, very closely. But again, it's hard to say. Nazi politicking is a very fickle thing. And it's very hard to tell who exactly would come out on top in the kerfuffle that would follow. Wow. Yeah, things are pretty dead. God, I'm tired. I don't know where everyone is. It's weird. Don't know. Like, the announcement went out. I mean, I'll give it 15 minutes, but unless I start getting questions, like, I am less tired today. Well, Petch, you've got me all to yourself. If you have a question that's been burning at you, now would be the time to poke me with it. Yeah, it's one of them days, isn't it? So ramblings have started, and no one's around, and no one is doing anything, and I mean, I suppose if there's no one else asking questions, I can do with a few announcements. So the recorded video series with Lebanon has run into some snags. I went to re-access the recorded footage and it's been corrupted, along with some of the recordings I made, for reasons I do not quite fully understand. Yeah. So unfortunately, I don't know if I'll be able to revive that. So the first recorded series will likely be Sea Power. I'm working on a plan, because of a mod set I found, to do a Sea Power Let's Play of the Pacific Strike campaign, but with my flagship being a very, very unique asset. But I'll not spoil anything more than that. In regards to other things, we've picked the topic for the first episode of The Anchorage that myself and Cycling and Phoenix will be recording. Might be recorded this Saturday, maybe. Might take a couple of weeks to come out. Depends on how our schedules all align for that. But the topic will be European navies, what they are doing, what they should be doing, and what their roles actually are to the governments themselves who run them. This doesn't include the UK, because I will literally spend 40 minutes railing against everything to do with the UK Navy right now, and we'll never get anywhere. I mean,
Western Abbey.
there's no one here. There's no questions. There's no one here.
I mean, it is not the day.
Yes, I did announce that that was going to be pushed back.
Yeah, because I'm just hopping in because I've got like 20 minutes.
I'm probably going to be shutting
Because-
it, like unless I get like at least night in, at least night's questions will give me something to do in like the next 10 minutes. I'm probably just going to, you know, wind it down. Like, make no mistake, there's like, I do love ramblings, but when I'm this, you know, forcing myself to go along and not keel over.
Because me and Dragon had the awkward thing. If you caught us on D&D night,
That's fine. I don't expect you to be here. Would you just Foxo, do what you do best. Ramble about the medieval culture. I've literally just been dragged away.
okay, what do y'all want to know about medieval England?
Tell them about the boats.
But the stuff was okay. Right. Are y'all aware that not all rope is equal in that? Because you see, one of the things that the Vikings during the Great Heathen Army and the Viking raids on the British Isles and France, one of the most valuable goods for the Scandinavians that they looted from the British Isles was rope. And that's because northern France and the British Isles and the Netherlands, especially the eastern parts, southeastern, are very good for growing flax. Now, flax rope, some of the oldest rope in human use, predates in some forms writing. It is that old. And flax rope has an interesting trait, unlike its Mediterranean counterparts, where it is very... Yes. I know it's linen rope. But linen rope is heavily associated with the Mediterranean linen rope, which is a different strain and different way of making rope. So when I'm referring to flax rope, I'm referring to Northern European flax rope, not the Mediterranean linen rope. Because there's someone on Dr. Clark's server who has way too much books on this. But basically, Northern European flax or Northern European linen rope, if you're going to be like Pedge, has an advantage over its Mediterranean and its Scandinavian Baltic counterparts. And that is the local fibers that make it up from the local species of flaxes are very hydrophobic compared to other species of flax fibers. Which meant that the rope was a lot better than contemporary 11th century rope for sailing in high salt environments. Which is actually something interesting because Roman rope from the Roman conquest of Britain had significant issues because they brought over Mediterranean linen rope, and Mediterranean linen, well, in the cold environment, dries out. And when it dries out in a salinated environment, it becomes brittle, which, if it's being stored just the boats not at sea, means that your rope has a much shorter lifespan. It's the same thing for a lot of Baltic Coast rope, Baltic Coast flax, which a lot of in the medieval period were transplanted Mediterranean flax species and not the North Sea and English flags, which is why Scandinavians had the same issue. And that led to the North Sea and Dutch and English and the Scottish being able to maintain the same ships for significantly cheaper because their rope would last longer. This is why when Jarl Halfdan is ransoming, according to his saga, the men of Northumbria, so Northumberland at this, it's Northumbria, but it becomes Northumberland when it gets reduced down to the single county. He demands a part of that ransom in English flax rope or English linen rope, which is significant. It's, by medieval standards in that period, is very high quality rope, which is why, strangely, one of the weirdest things that comes up in history that I'm still reading up on is the fact that in the period of the Varangian Guard, one of their, especially in the 11th century after the Norman conquests, when you get the Varangian Guard being mostly populated not by Norsemen but by Anglo-Saxons and Norsemen, you see something pretty interesting, where especially stuff like 3rd, 4th, and 5th noble sons who are going to the Varangian Guard, the Emperor and his court are using their guards' ties to the nobility in England and the Netherlands and northern Germany, sort of Schleswig-Holstein, northern, so around the neck sort of regions, to get access to Northern European linen rope, which is interesting because it made significantly better seafaring in the Mediterranean, which is just I haven't read yet too much because unfortunately I can't find too much. Civilian history doesn't tend to get a lot of focus, and the history of the rope trade even less so.
Maybe we should start a museum.
There already is quite a few. And it's interesting because English and Dutch rope was, until the 1800s, one of Northern Europe's biggest exports, with it being sent over to the colonies and being sent out east and into the Mediterranean. Because compared to the species of flax that makes linen in the Indian subcontinent and Mediterranean, it's a lot more hydrophobic because of how the fibers are assembled. Of course, that changes over time when the Europeans start making composite ropes, because one of the composite ropes the Royal Navy liked was a mixture of linen, early forms of woven cotton, and if you're the first and second rate, if you're the second and third rates, actually silk, because hemp rope. Okay, right. Yes, hemp rope as well, but hemp rope was used for a different thing in the Royal Navy, because you don't moor a ship with the same rope you you rig the sails with. Hemp is good for a lot of things, and did see a lot of use in the Mediterranean and the West Indies. The issue is, it is heavy, and it's very water absorbent.
Which is great for anchor cables and mooring lines.
Yeah, so it's great in civilian use, like on shore, but when it's up the top of a 20-foot tall mast,
Yeah, no. No.
it getting easily sodden is
I believe the
quite
term
the
is
negative.
a significant emotional event, Foxo.
A significant capsizing risk, which is why noticeably, despite arguably being smaller than some of the Chinese treasure ships, from what we know of them, even the late period Carrack's early galleons had taller main masts, because they were using significantly lighter rope that was significantly more hydrophobic. So the taller mast would have less effect on the ship's center of mass.
It's also worth, from what we know, that Chinese treasure ships have been possibly oversized in terms of their height. They were more akin to ocean-going barges. Large, yes, but not the tall, almost junk-like ships that people have perhaps been led to believe.
But yeah, the thing is, it's complicated.
Yes.
Because we know from what the Europeans were doing that you can make ships of that size if you've got the money. And you can make them that tall. And given how we've got accounts of pre-colonial California from the pre-European arrival in the Chinese language, it suggests that they were able to transit the Pacific to a very limited degree.
Even if all they did
which
was
means that they need a bloody big boat.
Yeah. Even if all they did was basically go, okay, we got here. There's fuck all here. We're going home.
Let's head home. We've got some tribute, some cool spices. Let's go home.
Like, it's important to remind that, like, crossing the Atlantic to the New World is one thing. Like, there are stop-offs, like, you could put in the Canaries, or the Azores, or Bermuda, or the Caribbean. Basically, there are lots of different "oh fuck, something's gone wrong" moments, even in the early colonial period. For the Chinese, for the Chinese crossing to America, unless they accidentally discover Hawaii, and that is a massive prickly mess Hawaii is, I wouldn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Okay, so from what I remember of the accounts, they went through the Barents Sea.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
Yes, which is why, and some of the descriptions that survive in the Chinese language sources, and I'm getting this like third, fourth party information, so take it with a grain of salt, is a rough bit where the Cascadian coast, and specifically the Isle of Victoria, which means that they would have come through the Cascadian coast and the Victoria.
Makes sense.
Victoria is that very large pill-shaped island off Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Which is surprising, because that means they somehow went against the trade winds to get there, which implies it was a very slow transit.
Yep.
Which means that they would have needed ships the size that they're claiming, that contemporary historians claim they had.
Yeah, understandable.
Because interestingly, unlike when you get the accounts of Spanish explorers and British explorers, the Chinese weren't setting up resupply and small outpost colonies where a ship could dock and pick up a whole bunch more locally fished food or traded goods.
Mm-hmm.
So they were doing it on their own supply. Which is interesting, because also, get back to the rope quickly, them using heavier rope goes on to explain why, according to accounts, the treasure ships had such weirdly shaped sails. Because unlike the more efficient European style, where the sails are taller than they are wide, from accounts of the treasure ships, the sails are significantly wider than they are tall, which means they're getting less energy from the wind, but those massive sails are having less effect on the ship's center of gravity.
Makes sense. I think.
But yeah, I believe we actually have questions now.
Yes, I have put one in the thing. Chandlord, top 5. I'm gonna go with 5 weapons in Fallout New Vegas. I had never played Fallout New Vegas, but I like the funny revolver that makes things go wee when you shoot it with them.
I think I'm the only one that's religiously played this game.
And I'm gonna, you know what, sort of, I'll tie in Chandlord's next question as well. It's kind of related, and otherwise it'd be kind of short. Also, Chandlord asks, favorite casino to rob blind via gambling in Fallout New Vegas.
Ooh. You know, I can't remember. It's been so long since I've played on modded. But as for guns, you've got to have the traditional number 1, the All-American. Yes, I want my 5.56 chambered M4 in Fallout. Which is the one that's iconic for going with the NCR Ranger riot gear. You have... I know it's not the best, but it's the hollow rifle from Dead Money. Because there's something hilarious about converting a pump-action grenade launcher into a gun that shoots holograms that kills people. Number 3. It's gonna be a weird one, but the Recharger pistol. Purely because it's a laser weapon. You get it early in the game from the Repcon rocket test site from ghouls. Did the ferals outside. That is a laser gun with infinite ammo. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but when you fully unload on someone, it starts recharging. 5. It's buggy as fuck and it hardly ever works. It's almost never worth it. And it's the gimmick from the DLC that's unintentionally a massive fucking meme. And that is the red glare. Because it's supposed to be a guided rocket launcher. But the projectile's so fast and there's a delay in the guidance for it. So the rocket immediately leaves the guidance range as soon as you're allowed to guide it. 5. It's the classic. It's the anti-material rifle. Because boom, headshot. Goodbye, Deathclaw.
Goodbye.
And also the fact that it's an obscure French 15.7mm anti-tank rifle.
Hecate 2.
Yeah. That never saw service even the Americans ever contemplated using. Because it was developed after the Barrett's rifle. And it's just weird to see them in the wasteland. And I mean, honourable mention because it's in Fallout 3. And you can get it in the Fallout New Vegas. Just not legitimately. And that is the European assault rifle. Because I am a foul girl through and through. If I had one of those, I would keep my rifle by my side.
You already do.
No, it's locked in a cabinet.
Apart from when you end up going to sleep with it.
That was one time.
And that's all I need to tease you about it.
You do not speak of the gnome incident.
Give me a
Heck,
Gauss
do not
rifle,
speak
a
of the
Tesla
gnomes.
cannon. The anti-material rifle is definitely a good choice. And the Sportalwood 9700.
Which one's that?
Unique Gatling laser which fires green blast, far lower dispersion, and also what's called higher fire rate.
Oh, is that the Star Wars reference one?
Basically.
The one that's just a Gatling blaster.
Basically.
Get them safely.
Not really. Apart from the next question. Patch asks, what was the best counter to woodworms, mollusks, for ships in the medieval age? I believe it was the same one that all wooden ocean-going ships used. Beaching and then cleaning it off by hand.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yes. But it depends what point in the medieval period. It's an important asterisk. Because early on, sort of... Right, what historically called the Dark Ages, but it's now called the early medieval period. Fleet's right. But around the 12th to 13th century, in the High Medieval period, especially for larger ships and royal ships, interestingly, the finding, what's the name? The very Henry VIII's big ship, the Queen Anne? No, whatever what it's called now, was actually instrumental into us figuring this out. Where they had started to varnish and treat wood with quite a lot of toxic chemicals and poisonous stuff on the outside to help prevent woodworm and mites and all that stuff. Sort of like how it's counted a lot today. Yeah, that's it, Queen Mary. Where if it's going to be in water, that's... Of course you have to clean it regularly still. But a healthy dose of toxic lacquer and varnish will be used to stop your wood getting infested and to help slow down barnacles forming on it. But barnacles are fucking pests, an invasive species. Also, I know I'm going to get a lot of sidetracks there, but are you aware that barnacles in Australia, the North Atlantic and North Sea barnacles, are an invasive species? That are slowly and actively killing reefs off the Australian coasts and driving and outcompeting local aquatic wildlife. Yeah, the Great Barrier Reef is it's suffering partly because of the barnacles, yeah, partly because of all the toxic shit that's being pumped into the ocean, partly because the oceans are warming, and partly from overfishing. But the biggest issue currently, aside from global warming, but that's an issue to everything, is the fact that the Great Barrier Reef is a very specialized and hyper-specialized ecosystem. That, because of how the Pacific temperature currents work, was actually quite isolated from other coastal ecosystems. And the issue is with the advent of large-scale sea travel, species like the European barnacle, I think it's the Gulf starfish that's native to the Persian Gulf and the sort of Gujarati region of India, have been inadvertently transported into the Australian coastline. And basically, just none of their natural predators there. So they've started decimating the ecosystem. Because fun fact, starfish are predatory.
Yes.
Most life on the Pacific coast of America and the Indian Ocean, where the main populations are, as for the large starfish, have evolved to deal with predatory starfish. The ecosystems on the coast of Australia haven't. The same thing, a lot like Australia's. While cane toads are famous, the European and the North American Appalachian fox are a horrifically invasive species in the outback, who will go as far as to pick fights with cassowaries and go after the nesting grounds and eggs of cassowaries. And cassowaries are a sister species to the emu, and they haven't really evolved instincts to protect their nest in the same way a lot of other birds do, because they never needed them. And now you've added foxes and wild dogs into that equation, and things have gotten messy. And don't forget cane toads. Oh. And cats. Yes. And hello, Corey. Oh, no, not Corey. But yeah, next question.
Do we have? Ah, there's Knight. How difficult is it to design a universal VLS system? It already exists. It's called Mark 41. You could stuff basically anything, any missile in Western inventory designed to work at sea into Mark 41 strike length. And I do mean any. Even the missiles that were built in France for their air defense frigates and destroyers, and the ones on Type 45, you can still stuff them into Mark 41 strike length and fire them out of it.
Yeah, but as for the difficulty of making it, very fucking hard.
Mark 41 strike length is the culmination of nearly 25 years of constant development.
Yeah, and you also need a quite sophisticated level of missile technology to be able to get to the point where your air defense missiles are in the same ballpark for size as your strike missiles and can do the same job and can be interchangeable in the launcher. Because earlier, for example, Talos and Terry were both technically anti-air missiles, technically doing the same job.
Mm-hmm.
But good luck firing them off the same launcher.
Yeah.
You have to do development from the ground up for the strike, the air defense, and all the different missiles. You have to.
And the only thing that led to the idea of the VLS was the realization that was first of all the creation of the standard missile range, which basically created a end missile that you then added boosters to, which therefore needed consequently bigger launch rails to create different versions. So you had SM-1, which was just the basic missile with its integrated booster, then SM-2, which had the additional booster and sustainer, which was the extended range missile, but you needed a different arm launcher for that. And basically it was... And then of course it went through the standard missile series. And until you get this idea that we build off this one missile, you don't get the beginnings of the idea of people thinking, well, hang on a minute. Well, and then of course there's the big revelation of... And then, of course, there's the big revelation of one of the other things that leads to VLS, is the missile rails that can fire SM-1 and Harpoon. And people go, okay, if we can fire these two missiles off the same rail, what else can we do?
Yeah, so quickly, I'm going to have to go say bye-bye, because my D&D is starting.
That's fine, that's fine. Farewell, Foxo.
Bye.
Yes, I'll very quickly work through Knights. But yeah, basically, there's a whole thing that leads to that, and then it basically builds out from the realization if we can put multiple missiles on launch rails, then VLS, it grows out of the idea for more flexibility, more magazine depth, and also significantly faster missile launch rate. Knights 81, if the somewhat class destroyers advanced gun system had worked, how would the ship take the 12 conventional prompt strike missiles they're getting now? The same way they're currently doing? Because you've literally described the scenario that actually existed, or actually exists. The guns on the Zumwalts worked exactly as intended. Still do. If they were on the ships. It's just that they only built 3 of the damn things. So the expensive ammo that would have been easy to procure at scale, that would have been cheap enough to procure at scale, if they'd have built as many of them as they were supposed to build, you know, wasn't. Nice. Well, again, in the history, the British get 6 type of holder class submarines, and in the late 2000s, get rated to AIP and hydrogen fuel cells. If they get it, I mean, it would depend. Is the Upholder a real boat? Let's have a look. Okay, so if we get the actual Upholders, which... I mean, they're not really big boats, if I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if you really could. You could do it, but the cost would be so ludicrous. I'd just say build a new sub. Build a new sub. It will be cheaper. I mean, by the late 2000s, these are very cheap, low capability diesel boats that will have been commissioned in the 90s. By the late 2000s, what a diesel boat has changed fairly markedly. So, again, like, yeah, just build new boats. No, the advanced gun system wasn't a failure, Knight. At all. I mean, I've just said why it wasn't. It was not a failure. It was a failure of procurement and policy, not the guns themselves. And that's the one. That's the Ukrainians would have sold Kuznetsov to China and Varag to India, and the Russians about to lose all 4 Kiev ships. What designs did Russia to make up for losing all the carriers? I don't know what that means. What is this? As the Ukrainians would have sold Kuznetsov to China and Varag to India, and the Russians about to lose all 4 Kievs, what designs did Russia to make up for losing all the carriers? You're gonna have to ask that one again, Knight, and reword it, because I have no idea what that's all about. If the that's it. If the Chinese got 2 Kirov-class heavy missile cruisers built in the 21st century, how much of the problem is that create for the US? They're definitely leaders of surface action groups. Don't get me wrong. They do bring a degree of well, they bring fleet air defense capability to the PLAN. In a way that it just didn't have prior to the development of their own VLS systems and their equivalent to Aegis. Admittedly, they're going to become dated very quickly if the Chinese don't meaningfully upgrade them, but, well, they're the Chinese, they're going to meaningfully upgrade them. And they will become very potent assets the US has to think about. But beyond that, they're not, like, they're things you have to think about. They're not, oh dear God, world-beating design. No, they are good force multipliers, and they're things the US has to think about when looking to fight the Chinese Navy. If the Kirov-class heavy missile cruisers sold to India, what would they likely change? The nuclear propulsion system. They'd probably want a fully conventional Kirov. I suspect. Whether or not they get it, I mean, they have experience with nuclear reactors, with nuclear-driven ships. So, I mean, honestly, politely, if they're being sold to India, they probably wouldn't change that much. The Kirovs are honestly fairly capable ships when built and remain fairly capable well into the mid-2000s, even without upgrades. SAN-6 Grumble is a very terrifying SAM, and Kirov has the ability to guide and track a decent number of them. She's not quite a Ticonderoga equivalent in terms of air defense, but she's the closest the Russians ever got to an Aegis combatant equivalent.
Hello.
Oh, it's the shipyard.
Hello, bud.
Hello, the shipyard. It's a pleasure to see you.
It's been quite a while, hasn't it?
It has a little bit. Plowing through some questions. And here's a good one for your rhyme list, quite timely. 1981. Did the Argentine Navy honestly believe the fake anti-ship missile launcher deception by General Belgrano was going to fool the Royal Navy? Remember, it's not about fooling the Royal Navy. It's about creating the perception of doubt. Sure, the missile launchers could be fake, but what if they're not?
The only way you'd actually know is if you had people on the ground who took image intelligence and fed that information back to Navy Command, who would know exactly if weapons were actually in those launchers or not. And the image analysis would also tell you if the box launchers were real or not.
But at the time, given the way the Argentinians did it, again, bear in mind, even without them, she's a potent threat.
Oh god, yeah.
I've been playing Sea Power a lot, and one thing that I have found is that if anything that has a gun armament that is more traditional and pre-missile era, especially cruisers and battleships, gets you within the range of those guns, it's just over. It's just over. You will be combat degraded relatively quickly, and if it's got any ability to self-defend from missiles coming the other way, or if you don't, or as is sometimes the case, if your missiles or missile tracking radar doesn't have the range, or you're unsure what's shooting at you, it's, yeah.
Yes.
But whether
What's the idea being is
also,
you don't get into range of the guns.
Yeah. But also, even if the fake anti-ship missiles didn't fool the Royal Navy, it would have probably caused them to devote information and intelligence resources to figuring out if they are or are not fake. And even forcing the Royal Navy or the British government to do that is forcing those resources to go looking at a fake to find out it's a fake, and not looking at other things. Like, I don't know, the Argentinians receiving their last shipment of Exocets, for example. Like, I'm not saying that's what happened, I'm just saying, as an example, because they're focusing on X, they might have missed Y, etc.
To be fair, though, the British government is actually quite, well, most nations are actually very good at finding out information that other nations don't want you to know. And they're also very good at seeing what you buy and what you have shipped. So they can put two and two together and go, okay, certain amount of Exocets, certain amount of launchers for the said Exocets. Which ones are land capable? They'll be in a manifest, ironically. which is a ship based, and then they can deduce from that what operational units they have, what they're fitted to. So it's probably a very good ruse de guerre. But I think that the RN smoked it pretty quickly. Oh shit, wasn't I meant to tell you that? Whoops.
It's alright.
Hee.
Well, fair enough. Okay, so Doini asks, what if the US standardized on the 8-inch instead of the 5-inch during the Cold War and post-Cold War period? Now, that is fairly interesting. It's entirely possible they could have. Given this would have to come out of naval light gun system. So the single 8-inch automatic. Now, in theory, there's no reason why you couldn't... They'd have to be a bit bigger, why you couldn't one-for-one replace on anything bigger than a Knox the 5-inch with the 8-inch. So, Spruance, Charles F. Adams. What you're basically trading is you're trading rate of fire for hitting power and range.
I think there's also another thing you'll be trading as well, is the amount of rounds you can actually fire down range.
Yeah.
The added increase of weight on the forward end of the ship will completely put off the ship's hydrostatic characteristics.
Bear in mind, James, remember, a lot of, prior to the... Apart from the USN frigates in this period, most USN combatants are double-ended, remember? Guns fore and aft.
True. I was thinking of that stupid...
The test bed.
Yeah. But in that case, then, it will definitely make the ships a little bit heavier in the water.
Like, obviously, we're talking about a world where these ships will be radically... Well, not radically different designs, but they'll be designed with these guns in mind.
Yeah.
Like, it's not... Like, this isn't a bad idea. Like, the 8-inch in this period does give you certain benefits when it comes to the interception of aircraft at range, and the ability to start dropping rounds around incoming missiles at longer range as well. The only problem is you've then not got the same almost right to the hit capability to keep shooting that you have with 5-inch 54. 5-inch 54 could keep engaging and incoming almost right up until it passed within about 100 feet of the ship. I don't think the single 8-inch is going to let you do that. Just because of the turret traverse speed and angles of fire. And blast effect as well.
I think, given off what they learned from the Worcester, with the auto-loading 6 inches, and then the Des Moines with the auto 8 inches, I still think the 5 inches would have been a better option.
Oh, no. For the Cold War period, the 5 inches is the overall better option.
Yeah.
It is.
Like, imagine how big that... Well, actually, no, we don't need to imagine how big that would be, because we already have a photo of said mount. It would make ships look really, really stupid. As well.
Yeah, it probably would.
Like, imagine a Tycho with one at each end. It would make it a very ugly ship even more ugly.
I mean, if 5 inches, if 5 inches has been retained on one end, that's not standardizing on 8-inch. That's adding 8-inch. Like, when I hear standardized, I think, okay, that's replacing 5-inch. But if you're saying that it's only going on one end of certain ships, that's not standardizing on 5-inch. That's equipping certain larger combatants with 8-inch, which is a bit of a different kettle of fish.
Kind of half-assing it.
Not really. At that point, you've still got most of the benefits of 5-inch on a lot of these ships at the aft mount, with a lot of the benefits of 8-inch as your forward mount.
Yeah, but then also brings into a lot more issues of You have to have more crew trained on different weapon systems. You have to have different shells, different handling capabilities.
Well, shells, well, bear in mind, if we're talking about this coming in when it's coming in, the United States is still maintaining 18 shell production for the Des Moines up until about 1962, I think. And the first new generation of ships with these guns, which use the same shells as the Des Moines, will be coming in that period. So you're not so much talking about a switch over, you're talking about expanding shell production, but maybe even not expanding shell production, because you're going from having to service shells for 3 ships that have 9 guns each to servicing a bunch of other ships that have 1 gun each. So you just it's excellent capability. I don't know if the Burks would. I do not think the Burks would.
No.
Given when the Burks are coming in, I think the Burke would be the thing that breaks it. Possibly even the Tychos as well. Given the rate of fire increase that is the jump between the early mod of 5-inch 54 and the late mod of 5-inch 54, as in the 5-inch 54 mount we all know and love today, the Mark 45. So if you compare the Mark 45 to the Mark 42, the Mark 42 had, in theory, the same rate of fire as the Mark 45, but Mark 45 is significantly more capable of sustaining that rate of fire. Mark 42 had difficulties with that. And given that Mark 54 brought back the range bracket that was lost to guns like, that was lost when the guns like the 8-inch, like the Iowa guns, left the fleet, which is one of the things that Mark 45 did. The benefits of that are probably going to outweigh any retention of 8-inch in the fleet as a new anymore. Now, make no mistake, 8-inch will be in the US Navy for a significant length of time. I mean, it would still be in service now with the Tychos, given the last of them still haven't gone yet, and likely won't go for another 3 to 4 years yet. What you might see is the Zumwalts just armed with a better version of 8-inch, since the big gun already exists. The Zumwalts will probably be armed with some version, or a new version of an 8-inch gun, rather than having to develop some sort of 6-inch gun. Again, like I've said, for the Burks as air defense ships, the 5-inch's rate of fire is a much... And given it has the same range bracket as the old 8-inch, the rate of fire matters more. And the ability to carry more rounds matters more. For something like Zumwalt, no, the 8-inch matters more. But for something like Burke, the more modern 5-inch does matter a lot more. Bone Millboy asks, what if Emperor Frederick I had his throat cancer treated early, as was possible, and rules for multiple decades under Wilhelm II? You're talking a significantly liberalized German Empire. You're talking a German Empire where, if he does it right, Prussian influence and a lot of the heavier elements of militarism might be broken from the German state and its character. You might see a Germany that embraces the various different parts of itself that aren't Prussian. where Bavarian, Saxonian, Rhinelander, the various other... Because remember, the German Empire was an empire. The various kings in Germany were still monarchs. Whilst it was technically a unitary state, it was also very much still a confederation. It was somehow both at the same time. The German Empire is a very weird thing. But, like I said, if that empire liberalizes, and especially since it's known that Frederick I did have a lot of disagreements with Otto von Bismarck, although he did agree on some points with him, in particular his policy of, you know, keeping Germany preeminent and not pissing other people off. Or at least not preeminent, but at least not seen as enough of a threat to be worth ganging up on. Then in theory well, it's really, really hard to say. Like, that is a very, very deep dive. I mean, that's one for a bigger panel on another day. I'm gonna mark that with a little check mark. We're gonna come back to that at some point. I'm gonna come back to that Bogomil book, because that is actually a fairly interesting hypothetical. Get it occasionally that really do make me think. In 1961, as the Ukrainians have sold the Kuznetsov to China and the Varik to India, as both Kuznetsov class property Ukraine and Russia is about to lose all 4 Kievs as they are retired, what carrier designs did Russia have to make up for losing the 4 Kievs to age, and Ukraine send the 2 Kuznetsovs? First of all, only the earliest of the Kiev... Well, the Kievs at that point, yes, they were old, but they were retired because the new generation of carriers were coming in. They were retired because there was something to replace them. Not all of them were old. Least of all Baku.
Yeah, Grigorovich was quite modern.
Yeah, Baku doesn't come until 87. Sorry, question. Admiral, yeah. Baku doesn't come until 87, and Novorossiysk doesn't come until 82. Those 2 ships, if the other options for Russian carrier aviation have gone away, can be retained into the post-Soviet era. They probably won't be carried... Well, whether or not Yak-38 persists with them, I don't know. There's no reason why, as far as I'm aware, Yak-38 couldn't be kept going. If there's no alternative to it. I mean, there is the exceptionally cursed option that
You got the replacement Yak that gave the
141.
yeah.
The thing with 141 is that it does have the problem of being well, 141 or Yak 41, which is its internal designation, and probably would have been the designation that it would have held in service. If the thing is, the reason that it could be let lapse, very much, joint development was announced with Lockheed Aircraft. If the two Kievs are retained as your carriers, and those are your carriers, you've got Admiral Gorshkov, Baku, and her half-sister, then Yak 141 goes from something you can let lapse to, no, we need this. We need this. This is not a nice to have anymore. In terms of carriers themselves, very much Russian shipbuilding spends 12 to 15 years at a very severe nadir. They scrape out some of what they were finishing in Russian yards, basically because it kept people's hands on their tools and not on rifles. And the government in Moscow felt that was slightly better than having them thinking about revolution until they'd gotten the situation somewhat in hand. Beyond that, in fact, you would probably see a lot. You'd probably still see a desire to acquire the Mistrals. From France. Given that they would, be not only, well, in fact, it might even be more attractive. Because not only you might actually see them looking to acquire, maybe instead of the 2 ships they wanted, the 3 ships. Because at that point you're replacing 2 larger ships with 3 smaller ones, and I think, given they can handle large, heavy helicopters like Puma, which is a long boy, in theory, and a tall boy as well, they would possibly be able to handle 141 in their hangars. If they can, that basically means that Russian naval aviation continues with the Mistrals, which is absolutely fine. Well, correction. It would continue if they didn't pull a funny in Crimea. But then that draws me back to the ships that would replace them in with IRL and at this point. Because yeah, basically, again, and then the first post-war carriers, quote unquote, would be the real ships that are being built in Sevastopol right now. Although, again, you'd have the 2 Kievs still soldering on. Ironically, given the simpler nature of the Kievs and the way in which they're designed, they might actually, and the fact there would be 2 of them, they might actually weather the storm a little bit better than Kuznetsov did.
We also... Right. This is still our timeline, so obviously Ulyanovsk and the other thing wouldn't actually be finished, would they?
No. From what I understand, it's basically just... From what I understand from reading the question, the only difference is Ukraine goes, these are ours now, go fuck yourself.
Valid point.
But basically, I assume delays with Kuznetsov means she's still in Ukrainian yards or near Ukraine or in a port, ready to be commissioned when everything breaks down, as opposed to, as you know, scraping into commission and running off to Northern Fleet before the USSR goes kaput.
Well, didn't she run off after
I don't
the
believe-
Soviet Navy basically went tits over heel?
I don't believe so. I think she was with the Northern Fleet before everything went tits up.
Hang on, let's have a look. Because there's a vague recollection, whatever. English is hard. I believe they might have been Russian before she pissed off.
She was launched in 1985.
Yep.
She was renamed in 1990.
Um,
In 1989, she undertook under. Oh no, Ukrainian president.
Viktor Yagin.
Yeah, he told her Kuznetsov that she was property of the Ukrainian Navy until the Ukrainian government made a decision on her face, on her fate. However, Admiral of the Northern Fleet literally arrived and gave the order to sail, so she remained in the Northern Fleet. And in December, she sailed.
So
I assume this assumes that the Admiral either doesn't arrive or arrives too late. Also, at that point, I mean, I don't know if the Ukrainians would. Yeah, actually, no, they would have. They would have sold. The Ukrainians have no need of a carrier. They just do not. I mean, also, politely, Knight, the Ukrainians would have probably sold Kuznetsov to Russia and Varig to China. Kuznetsov would have been an exceptionally powerful bargaining chip for the Ukrainian government, especially against the Russians, in much the same way as their nuclear weapons and strategic bombers were. There's an awful lot of bargaining power one can do with an asset like that. Especially as the Russians would direly want her.
she is basically the epitome of the Russian Navy's doctrine of heavy aviation missile cruiser concept, isn't she?
No, she's basically a transition. She's a transition away from that concept. And Ulyanovsk was supposed to be the next step after that.
Yeah, but
They
she's still
basically-
got that striking power that
the-
makes the Russians very much like her.
Well, no,
Even if they never use her.
She retains the striking power because it gets her out of the Turkish Straits. And it is useful, don't get me wrong, but there's a reason why they moved from Stovall to Stobar.
True.
1971 asks, if the Ulyanovsk class carrier Ulyanovsk had been finished in time, do the Russians take her instead of Kuznetsov? How might that possibly influence European navies in future procurement? I mean, they're gonna want to go for broke and get both of them if they can. If both Kuznetsov and Ulyanovsk are finished, they're both gonna be ordered to sail to Northern Fleet. And in any hypothetical negotiation, Varig is unfinished, the Russians won't want her. But if the Russians will want both of their finished carriers. They won't want just one, they'll want both of them. Again, the Ukrainians will have more leverage, but in the end, they will accept whatever terms they hash out with the Russians in exchange for those ships. Which will leave the Russians with one nuclear-powered Sto-Katobar carrier and one Stobar carrier, which is conventionally powered. Now, those ships are probably going to have 1990 syndrome for a bit, but eventually, excuse me one second. Oh dear, horrible ringing in my right ear for some bloody reason. But yeah. Yeah, so at that point, yeah, they're going to attempt to seize both ships. Yeah, they're going to attempt to seize both ships. They're probably going to fail. I mean, thing is to do, prior to Kuznetsov, they had no ski jumps, and it looks like after her, they're not going to have them either. These LHDs they're building are not going to have ski jumps.
Nope.
Or arresting-wise. But yeah, it's basically going to end up with 2 Russian carriers, and as to how that's going to affect European Navy's future procurement, it's going to depend entirely on how the Russians use or appear to use those ships, and if they come up with a decent air wing for Ulyanovsk that includes the full menagerie of capability. So strike, carrier-borne, airborne, early warning, fixed wing, and other things like that. If they can, then suddenly you have a few knock-on effects. For one thing, the Royal Navy can justify altering the Queen Elizabeth-class carriers from Katovar to Stovall when your opponent's carrier assets do not have anything above helicopter airborne early warning, and you also have helicopter airborne early warning, and your fighter aircraft are going to be significantly better than theirs in the fleet air defense role, even if it's a shorter range fleet air defense role. If your opponent's carrier can put up not only carrier airborne early warning, but fixed wing tanker assets as well to enable it to launch full load strike aircraft and then do what most carriers do, which is tank them up after they've been catapulted off to re-give them the range that they couldn't have because they've been launched with a full load of ordnance, it suddenly becomes, no, the QEs are Katovar carriers, or we just don't procure them because there is no point. Even if you want to do airborne, even if you want to do anti-submarine work up north, and that's the primary reason you're procuring these carriers, to do that work and protect that work, if the Russians have an actual carrier and you might be the first to run into that carrier, your asset up there has to at least be able to go toe-to-toe with that asset, at least in a defensive role. The Invincibles made sense and were useful because they offered an equivalent defensive and offensive capability, if not a better defensive and offensive capability, to the Kievs, which meant that if the Kievs came down to disrupt NATO ASW operations in the southern North Sea, and as NATO pushed further north, and the Americans, for whatever reason, didn't have a carrier around, Invincible with Sea Harrier and Seeking Crow Nest could be reliably expected to tangle with and probably beat a Kiev in a carrier fight.
Fleet, I don't want to extend this question any longer, but have we thought about the replenishment ship that would have to also be constructed or nicked to take these ships?
What do you mean?
Well, in real life, the Russians had a single, basically Russian version of Fort Vig with lots of AK-630s.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Russians have never built a RAS ship proper. They've always lent on the Karmas or, God forbid, nowadays is the Academic Pashin. But at that point, when you want a full carrier strike group for the Russian Navy to actually operate, and you're using nuclear-powered ships, and you're going further because a nuclear ship can do it, you're going to run into the problem of how do you conduct fleet operations with a carrier strike group without a acceptable RAS ship?
Basically down to the fact that she would still be performing the same role as envisaged for her by other Northern Fleet carriers, which was the carriers are assets designed to deploy and operate in the North Sea and in the Northern North Sea and the Arctic. They are not designed to be round-the-world ships operating far away from their bases. Their Mediterranean deployments were very much showing the flag and ability to conduct operation and a chance to get more flying hours in.
Yeah, but then you've got the issue of you need to either do what we did back in the early days of the coal-powered ship, where you had to have friendly ports everywhere to basically replenish, refuel, rearm, which is a bit of a ball ache, or the strategic thing of obviously having a auxiliary to go along with a ship. Now, granted, the North Sea is perfectly fine. You do sometimes need a replenishment ship there. The Russians still need a tanker to come out just for ships operating in the North Sea. So
You have to bear in mind that Ulyanovsk would be the replenishment ship for her task force, given that I believe that Ulyanovsk was supposed to be entirely nuclear driven. So she would be the replenishment ship for her task force.
but then what happens? Right, that's fine. But then what happens when you run out of bombs and ammunition?
Oh. Well, that's even better, because you want to know what Ulyanovsk can do, because of what she's got. She's got cats and traps. She can do carrier onboard delivery.
Yeah, but that's fucking dangerous, mate.
The US has been doing
Even
it.
the Yanks don't do that.
Yeah, they do. Don't
What,
they?
bringing in £1,000 bombs onto ships via... I'm pretty sure they just sling them over from an auxiliary, don't they?
No, I'm fairly certain carrier underway delivery has included ordnance. I'll check.
Because that's not really a safe way to do it. Because imagine if you screw that landing.
I mean, yeah, fair enough. Okay, that's look. Well, at that point, then you do have. I mean, they can't do unrep in the traditional sense, but well, they're gonna have the same problems they had historically. That's not really changed. But again, given the roles these ships are envisaged to perform, that's not really a downside.
Okay, because obviously they did have that single.
It is a downside, but it's not a stupid downside.
Well, she was. Well, because actually at the time that we're looking at when the two ships were being fitted out and commissioned, Bereznia, which is the AOR, was actually still in service.
I mean, she could be. I mean, if they have two carriers, there would be a reason to retain her.
Yeah, because she was only, 20 years old by the time she... No, a bit longer.
Yeah.
She was about 25 when she went to the scrapper, but
Yeah.
there is even a photo of her unwrapping with Kiev.
Yeah, so they can do it. I mean, and also, we're all saying about, well, are they going to build new large carriers? No, they might not build new large carriers, but I think the thing we've perhaps missed is that the thing they build might be an underway replenishment ship, not a carrier.
Because logistics is the one thing that people seem to forget when it comes to...
And if you've got these two large assets, especially if you've got Ulyanovsk, that suddenly becomes a lot more viable, because Ulyanovsk can act as tanker to her escorts, which means that you need the underway. The only thing you need at that point to sustain her at sea for a decent amount of time is an unrep ship. And if you build a solid store ship with limited fuel capacity as well, you can also use that to unrep Kuznetsov as well.
Mm-hmm.
Since they'll probably rotate through periods of activity. Although Kuznetsov will probably use to qual most of the air wing, but Ulinot is going to have to go to sea to qual things like the carrier underway replacement, the carrier onboard delivery aircraft, and the fixed wing AWACS, since, you know, Kuznetsov doesn't have cats, so she's the only one that can qual them.
Hmm. Hmm. Right, I'm gonna need to run off. The
Right,
missus is
fair
going to be here in a minute.
Fair enough. Pleasure to have you again, as always.
That's all right. Thank you very much for hosting tonight, and have a nice evening, everyone.
Fair enough. Take care, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Right. So, Saduni asks, how does America sticking with 8-inch in the scenario affect America's allies and adversaries? It honestly doesn't. It honestly doesn't. Politely, America with 8-inch doesn't really have an effect on its rivals or partners. Everyone else has their reasons for sticking with the gun calibers they stick with. British with 4.5, Russians with 130, various European navies with 5-inch or thereabouts. Knight 6831 asks, could the 1949 Daring and Battle class been have easily converted into missile destroyers as the Fletcher's, Sumners, and Gearings were by the Taiwanese? Those were not easy conversions. The conversions of the Fletcher's, Sumners, and the Gearings by the Taiwanese were not easy or quick. They were done because there was basically no other alternative. If the Taiwanese wanted guided missile destroyers, and they wanted them in a semi-reasonable time frame, that's the only way they were going to get them. Could you do the same to a Daring in battle? Yeah, you probably could. But again, the cost involved would be heavy, and it would not be an easy job. Knight 6831, for the other European navies, how much of a problem did the Royal Navy pulling? I think this will be the last question. Mimo will discuss this at length. How much of a problem did the Royal Navy pulling the carpet out from under everyone's feet building pre-dreadnought battleships cause? They didn't pull the carpet out from under everyone's feet, and it didn't cause a problem. The navies of Europe had been moving towards what we would recognize as the modern battleship, or the all-steel battleship, for a significant part of the 1880s. The Italians had built the Re Umberto class. Which were arguably as, if not more powerful than the Admiral class. Built by the British. So again, and are arguably very, very closely aligned, given they have hooded barbettes, with being pre-dreadnoughts. They almost look like pre-dreadnoughts in the way they're laid out and arranged. And they are arguably a match for any of the vessels they're likely to face, even up to about the 1900s, 1900, 1902. You've got the Germans with their ships they're building. The Royal Navy really didn't rip the rug out from under anybody. The world was moving in that direction of this modern battleship with a substantial anti-torpedo boat and secondary battery, and 2 sets of 2 guns, 1 fore, 1 aft. Whether it was armoured in iron or steel was basically irrelevant. Anything you want to add, Foxo? Not Foxo, sorry. Mohe?
No, I'm indeed that foxhole.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, so there's not really much to say here. In any significant sense. I mean, there's not really much more to say. I mean, I've said what I wanted to say. Like, there isn't really much more to say than what I've said.
You don't need to repeat that.
No. And with that, we come to the end of our time. Thank you to the YouTube audience for coming in clutch with plenty of questions for us to rattle through. And that is basically that. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye-bye.